Me.
Yeah. How's the
All right.
yeah, I'm just using an iPhone. How is
Me
that?
too. That's what
Oh,
I'm
great.
using. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, how you doing, Rob?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for being part of this. This is very surreal. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I was just checking out the one you did with Tim Pierce. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was really, really, really good conversation you had with him. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, that was very special as well. I feel so lucky that, we've had the school here, we do lessons. And then when everything went crazy with the quarantine, I said, how can we do something different? Because the whole culture within our school, there's multiple lessons going on and people seeing each other. How can we bring everyone together in a really cool way? And I've been so lucky to be able to reach out to, legends such as yourself, and they're willing to, talk to me for a bit. So thank you.
Absolutely. What's your curriculum in
So what we
school?
do, we do guitar, bass, drums, piano, voice, violin, flute, but mostly guitar, bass, piano, voice. That's our core. And all the teachers pretty much it's a sort of choose your own destiny sort of thing. So
Interesting.
we assess the student and we adapt the curriculum to where they want to go. So let's say they want to only play Ozzy songs. Well, we'll teach you only Ozzy songs, but we're going to use those songs to teach you your theory and your timing and your feel and stuff like that.
That's interesting because when I was teaching at Musonia, that's Randy Rhodes' mom's school, and Randy used to teach there,
Wow.
and he would teach right next door to me. So when I first started teaching there, I was already a member of that version of Quiet Riot, the '70s version with Randy, and so I asked him for pointers, and that's exactly what he told me. He says, "Well, this is what I do. I break it down into two different things. The student will come to me with a song that they want to learn. Then I'll teach them the song. Then I'll teach them the theory behind that song.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I started adapting that, and I've been teaching ever since like that, because I also when I studied music in college, I was already playing in clubs professionally. So following the steps, and I'm talking about late '60s, which is there was no rock school whatsoever.
Right.
I mean, there was barely a jazz band in the school. And so we were just studying everything from scratch, and all the fundamentals that they were teaching me in the first semester, I was already applying that
Right.
professionally, playing in clubs every night. So it was kind of like, what am I doing here? I needed
Right.
to be more on a fast track,
I get
which
it.
seems to be what you guys do. So that's wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you. That actually makes me feel very validated in what we're doing. But yeah, a lot of our teachers, all of our teachers really, they're either still currently gigging, professionally or semi-professionally in the studio session stuff. So we try and give them a real world experience as opposed to here's the way you have to play the E minor chord and your thumb stays here and it never moves. And it has to be versatile and applicable in a real world setting.
Yeah,
Super.
absolutely. Uh, well, having the thumb in the back, for pivoting, I
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I really enjoy also teaching face to face is that you can actually look at the student and look at the body and walk around them and say, okay, this is how you actually place your shoulders and your arms and
Hmm.
things like that. That sometimes it's a little bit more challenging to do it if you're not in the same room.
Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
we had to adapt on the fly. I think I mentioned in one of these a couple of weeks ago, like the town where our physical school is, where I am currently, we were the second COVID death in New York State occurred right in our town. So we jumped online before anyone else was shutting stuff down because I kind of had an inside line that something was going on. So we had to adapt very quickly. And luckily, most of our teachers have students that they were teaching outside of the school around the country, on Skype and things like that. So we just kind of reeled it in and made it work. But definitely that in-person experience is very hard to replicate online.
Mhm. Yeah, but then again, the fundamentals can,
Right.
and if you have enough of a space, that you can actually see the student, watch how they're playing,
Hmm.
then you can actually make comments,
Yeah,
about it and try to correct whatever they might be doing wrong.
totally.
Uh, You got some questions for me? I know that you
I do.
emailed me some, but there seems to
Yeah,
be like people popping in, and I want to see if there's any other questions.
totally. Yeah, we'll jump. Usually, I'll jump back and
Okay.
forth. So I'll ask one here,
Okay.
and then if ever we're talking, you see me go like this. I'm just trying to read what the people are saying.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And if you
but
see me go like this, it's just I just fell asleep. Okay.
that's okay. It's all good. It's all good.
So yell at me.
I got
Wake
my
me up.
energy drink here, so I got the
Okay.
caffeine. Um, all right. So I mean, legendary career. So many huge stages. I was just watching the that US Festival gig from '83.
Mhm.
What's that like? You know, like how do you manage the nerves when you come out on stage and
Oh,
there's
that.
so,
Well, in the case of Quiet Riot, and I just say in the case of Quiet Riot because we're applying the question to that certain event, which is the Oz Festival, being in front of 350,000 people. The band had been briefly together. We our first show was March 18th and 19th at the Roxy in Los Angeles in 1983. So from March by May, Memorial Day weekend, which just happened,
right,
of 1983, we were playing in front of 350,000 people. Now, for me, it was home because I prior to that I had been playing with Ozzy.
right,
So with us, we did some stadiums and we did big shows and a lot of arenas. So 15, 20,000 people, 250,000. It's just a blur.
right.
After the first 100 people, it's a blur. It's just a mass of people. And Quiet Riot, the Randy Rhoads version was the type of band that it didn't matter how many people were in the audience. We always gave the same show. We just went for it. And it was an era that everybody went for it, not just us, but everybody else did. And that's why it was so exciting. The music, it
Sure.
was a lot of fire. Go out there and do it. Have fun. Rock out, rock the place. Uh, it's almost like you have a brief moment in history to
Right.
do something that is going to be unforgettable. And if you don't do it, somebody else will after you, and you will be
Totally.
forgotten, never to be seen again. you know? So it was a must to go out there and do the show of your life every single night.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a musician. I grew up. I was born in '83, actually. So I found guitar when I was about 12 years old, and my guitar teacher, on like the third lesson, he turned me on to Ozzy, and he
Mm.
said, "You need to have this record."
Yeah.
And he
Tribute.
he
Yeah.
he gave it to me, and to me, there wasn't internet and stuff back then, so in my mind, the dudes on that record, that must be Ozzy's band forever, even though it
Mhm.
was so many years removed from it. And I don't realize that Randy wasn't around, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. But to me, like whenever I turn all my students onto that. I say, this is the quintessential Ozzy thing. You got to hear this. The band was on fire. Um, what was that experience like? Like that was a
Well,
solid.
it's interesting that your teacher pulled out tribute because uh, uh, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman were recorded before Tommy Aldrich and I joined the band.
Mhm.
So we didn't play on the records, obviously. And the difference between tribute and the studio recordings, in addition to Tommy and myself, is the fact that by then, Randy knew the material. This might sound really strange, but if you ever make, anybody who's ever made a record, and applies to every record that I make, when you're in the studio, you're just creating. You're just in the whole process of creating the music. Once you get out of the studio and perform in front of a live audience, that's when the music comes alive.
Sure.
It's happened to me so many times. Like, it's okay, I made a record and this is the way that the song goes. Because when you make a record, you're in the studio, outside of the engineer and the producer and maybe, you know, the manager of the band or girlfriends or whatever, nobody else is around. So you're just like under a microscope, you know, playing and making sure that everything is spot on, all everything coordinates, you know, all the notes, the chords,
Right.
everything. Once you go live, that's like all that goes out the window. Now you're performing. Now you're living the music, and it's just it takes a whole different meaning completely. So by the time that we recorded what became known as Tribute, now there's a controversy about that record. on the credits, it said recorded live in Montreal, right? That was okay. Let me give you a little background on that information. We did about three. Let me see, three. No, actually, we did. Okay, we did one King Biscuit hour, one Westwood One audio. We did two, because the first one, and I can't really recall which one came first, Westwood One audio or King Biscuit. But the one in Montreal, Ozzy was not happy with the results. So that went in the shelf.
Wow.
That tape is not to be heard by anybody, right? And we, about 2 or 3 weeks later, we re-recorded that in Indianapolis. In Indianapolis. Okay. So that's the one that was released as a live record, in addition to one that became known as Bathead Soup. That was recorded in Cleveland, like 2 weeks into the band's tour in
Wow.
1981 for Blizzard of Oz, right? Okay, so Randy passes away, and they you know, Ozzy and Sharon decide to release a live record with Randy. On the back of the album, it claims to be from Montreal, which makes sense because that was never released. That was never broadcast. It was in the shelf because Ozzy did not like the way it sounded for some reason.
Right.
He heard things that he would play to me, and he'll go, "You hear that?" And I'll go, "It sounds fine to me," you know, and that will make him frustrated, you know. So there's a controversy on the internet that now we have such technology that you can take the songs and put them on Pro Tools and compare the tracks. And some people say, well, the solo is from Montreal and the rest of the record is from Cleveland.
Oh, wow.
I'm going like, you know what? Life's too short.
Right.
I'm just glad that I'm playing on the record. I move on with that.
Right.
So nevertheless, it was a whole different experience to hear Randy playing live. Not because he was not a great studio musician. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it that once he created the music, he recorded it and performed it live night after night, it would just progress. He would get deeper into the song, and there would be more expressions to his music, which is what it should be. Music is very organic. It's alive, you know. And if you record something live, you're just capturing that moment, you know, because the musician is going to play it a little bit different the next day. The band as a whole is going to play it different. The audience is going to be different. It's a different audience, a different city, a different everything, different water, different breakfast you had, you know, in the morning. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
All those little facts, man. That's, you know, to me as a kid, I was like, this is it. You know, I didn't. You grow up, you start to think, but that's really cool, and that must have been so cool to watch it organically grow, and the songs, and him kind of fall into them.
Yeah. Another thing that is the difference between those two albums, and Diary, and I'm not saying better
Tighter
or
technology. There it is.
worse, just for different. Yeah. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm
Hello?
there. It froze for a second. Yeah,
Hello?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry
You hear
about
me?
that. Yeah. One of the things that. Oh yeah. I hear you really good. One of the major factors, the difference goes for, you know, I'm not saying it was better or worse, but Tommy Aldridge's playing Tommy Aldrich brought in a leaning forward drumming style, something that he developed for at least a decade, maybe a decade and a half, because he was playing with Black Oak, Arkansas back in the 60s, and we're talking 81. So we're talking 60s and 70s, and Pat Travers. So that's a very boogie rock, like ZZ Top on steroids
Yeah.
type of feel, with double bass drum. So Tommy, his playing leaned forward, right? So, Randy grabbed onto that and started playing like that too. I don't think he didn't lean as much forward when we used to play in Quiet Riot. Mostly having to do that, the music did not lend itself to that,
Right. Right.
But with Tommy's drumming, he just, because if you look at a drummer, he's really the conductor of the band, or at least it
Yep.
should be,
Yep.
So that sets the tempo and the feel of so much, as the guy and back there just beating on things, you just, fall. You can either play with it or play against it. And if you play against it, it's not going to
You're
work.
done. Yeah.
So you just, follow in that groove.
Very cool. I see one of the questions here. So after the tribute, it was the Speak of the Devil, and then you went back to Quiet Riot for Mental Health. So what was the recording process like for Speak of the Devil?
Well, Speak of the Devil was in the works even before Randy passed away. If anybody's really interested in lots of minute details about that period, I wrote a book called Off the Rails. You can download it on Kindle or print on Amazon, and it's all there. But just to give you a synopsis of that, it was basically, there was a little bit of a competition going on between the Black Sabbath at the time with Ronnie James Dio.
Right.
Later on, I played with Dio in the band, which I love Ronnie dearly. That version of Black Sabbath and Ozzy as a solo artist. So somehow the record company got wind that Black Sabbath was working on a solo record. And so the record company told Ozzy, okay, you come up with one, but you got to record it before theirs come out.
Right.
Theirs released. So there was a bit of a rush to do that. And before you know it, after Randy passed away, there came the time that we went in to record it. And we only had about 5 days to learn material that I personally was not very familiar with. And I was just having a conversation with Brad Gillis a couple of days ago. He wasn't prepared either.
Right.
And I know Tommy wasn't, and so it was a little bit challenging because Ozzy did not really show up to rehearsals. So we had like 5 days of rehearsing Ozzy era Black Sabbath songs, which are completely different structures than the Dio song. The Dio Black Sabbath era, that was more song format oriented. The Black Sabbath versions were more like grunge. They were really way ahead of the time. They were more like the godfathers of grunge, just really cool parts put together, but not in a commercial sense. I think the most commercial song they ever did was Paranoid. And it's not really, it's the title of the song, but the word paranoid is not in the song. So it's not like somebody singing paranoid,
right.
or maybe paranoid. No, it's not even in there.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So it's one of those songs that it's simple. There's like 3 parts, but if you do not know which part comes next, I've jammed with people and they just completely get lost because they're a little bit similar. The sections, like the pre-chorus and the bridge, they're pretty similar.
Yes.
They're going up and down. Yeah. So we recorded that completely live at the Ritz, 2 nights, and no overdubs.
Wow.
What you hear of the band playing, I have no idea about Ozzy, if there was any overdubs or not. I don't know. But I can tell you this: me, I quit the band right after I recorded that. As soon as I came back to
Wow.
LA, I call up Sharon and I said, "Listen, I'm gonna join the new Quiet Riot band," and that was it for me. I never really saw them again for a long, long time. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
I mean, the Quiet Riot, that second time with you being in them, that's such an amazing time for, metal music and stuff because, the way it charted and I mean, just you hear those songs, they're epic, epic, timeless songs. And sometimes I feel like, in the Motley Crues and the Def Leppards and the Guns N' Roses, Quiet Riot, like they started a lot of that scene. So that's epic that you get to be there for that.
yeah. You know what's really interesting about the early '80s is that what became known as the Sunset Strip
Hmm.
sound, which is basically Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, Rat, Great White, Dokken, all those bands
Hmm.
that come out of that,
Great
that have
bands.
been around. That have been around from in the '70s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is what happened. Van Halen was the last rock band to get signed in the '70s out of Los Angeles, and they were part of the Sunset Strip. They used to play at Gazzarri's, which is
Hmm.
the Sunset Strip, and so they were the last band because right after that, the Knack had a big hit with My Sharona.
Right.
And then Devo and Blondie from the East Coast, and every new wave band and the English new wave and punk.
Hmm.
So that's where radio was at. That's what they wanted to play. So if you didn't have like really short hair, if you did not look like Elvis Costello, you were screwed. Essentially, you know. And uh, so we went into survival mode. By we, I mean all of us. We knew. Okay, we're gonna stick it out. Something's gonna happen because all of a sudden we can't turn into new wave musicians. This is not what we do. This is not what we aspire
Thank
to.
goodness.
I mean, it's I can't do it.
Yeah.
It's like saying the Cars turning into a '80s metal band. No,
Right.
that's not what they do. So you have to be the real deal.
Right.
Of course, there's bands that they're timeless because they have so many cool elements that, let's say, Cheap Trick. Cheap Trick would have been a great '60s band. They were a great '70s band. They were a great '80s band. You know, they're timeless because they have so
Right.
many elements that crosses over to all these different eras. Timeless music. But if you were going to talk about, let's say, Devo is pretty much new wave.
Devo. Yeah.
That's Devo.
Right.
They that's what they do. They're not gonna all of a sudden, turn into an '80s band, a metal band, hair
Right.
band. But they have their own space, their own category. So you know what? I've gone into. I'm so stuck in the '70s right now. That what was the original question again?
I was just the experience of being, in Quiet Riot, right as
Oh yeah,
that it was taken off
yeah.
the Sunset Strip, that whole scene.
Yeah, well, it was taking off in the '70s. Then new wave and metal came in, and that was it. They shut the doors. So we went into survival mode, and by that I mean is we were doing anything possible to keep our music alive and our hopes and our dreams. Randy went off and joined Ozzy in 1979. Kevin put his own band together called Dubrow, which a lot of those songs that were written in that era wound up on the Metal Health record.
Oh wow.
And I was living with Kevin at the time, so I got to play with him those songs live, a lot of songs. And meanwhile, there's a huge wave of metal coming from England.
Hmm.
Bands like Def Leppard, Saxon,
Sure.
and Motorhead, and Iron Maiden.
The new wave
Tons.
of British heavy metal. Yeah.
Yeah, they knew it.
Yeah.
Okay, that was happening in England, but LA didn't care about it. It wasn't like you have YouTube and you got social media that
Right.
if something is really cool, it goes viral and everybody exposed to it. Globally, no. Back then, it was like, no, we don't care. We don't want to know about it. So I in '81, I joined Ozzy, and I started touring. And in our opening bands, one on the first tour were Motorhead,
Wow.
and then later on, Def Leppard for their High and Dry record. Yeah, their second record. And then after that, we had Magnum, Starfighters, UFO, all of these bands. And I knew something was bubbling, something was up, but LA had no idea. Meanwhile,
Wow.
Kevin is struggling to get a record deal with Dubrow. And right before Randy passed away, Kevin asked Randy and myself, for our blessings for him to rename his band Quiet Riot. And we said, yeah, of course. So Randy passes away, and I'm in Los Angeles about to go to New York to work on the Speak of the Devil record. And I get a call from Kevin. He says, listen, would you like to come down to the studio where I want you to play on Thunderbird, which he wrote that song for Randy when Randy left Quiet Riot. I used to play that song with Kevin in Dubrow, and so I knew it. I mean, I came up with a bass line for that. And so I went in the studio and recorded the song, and it went by really fast, with Carlos and Frankie, of course, Kevin. And then they had some extra time, and they started asking me, well, do you remember like Slick Black Cadillac, which is the only song that was a carryover from the Randy Rhoads era onto the Metal Health
Right.
record. Kevin wrote that. Kevin wrote that song as a challenge from Randy to write a good song. Randy said, I dare you to write a good song, a great song. So Kevin came back with that one. And that became like an iconic Quiet Riot song,
Sure.
And I got to record about two or three more, at least two more, for the Metal Health record. And this is even right before I left to New York to work on the Speak of the Devil record. And here I am in the studio, Pasha, with the guys, Frankie Benelli. I had been playing with him since 1972 when we met in Florida. And I kind of like, he was my musical mentor. He's the first drummer who taught me, the only one who actually taught me about rhythm section, that
Right.
relationship, where does the bass fit within the rhythm section, my role. So playing with him was like second nature, And then of course Kevin, we had a history with Quiet Riot and Dubrow, and then Carlos, who I knew from the local scene. He was in a band called Snow, and we used to do shows together. So it felt really comfortable, felt like home, because I had really lost the joy of playing after Randy passed away. We would go on stage with the same Castle production, the Castle and the Dwarf running around, and the opening song to our show was actually Randy playing Diary of a Madman. That was our intro. So it was, I did not know how to deal with it. I didn't have the right self-improvement tools to work with that, of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I was not aware of my responsibility or the responsibility of all of those who are left behind to celebrate the music of our fallen bandmates. Because if we don't, that music just disappears.
Right.
Or it's not performed properly. Because I hear a lot of wonderful tributes to Randy's music, and I am so appreciative of it. But then again, I know what it sounds like to play with Randy. and
Right.
I know the certain elements and the nuances, you
Yeah,
know.
the intangible magic.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
anytime that I can actually step on stage with anybody and bring that I was there factor into
yeah,
Randy's music, I feel that that's my responsibility. No matter what the situation is. If somebody is celebrating Randy's music, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be
that's
there to make
awesome.
sure that it's performed properly, you know. So so yeah, I joining. So right after I finished the recording of Speak of the Devil at the Ritz, I made the decision to go into the unknown, which was joining the mental health version of Quiet Riot, just because I needed joy in my life. I needed really to the joy of making music again, which I completely lost.
I think that's really incredible. I think, us as, fan musicians, but fans of music as well, to have, you said it so perfectly, you were there, that factor to be able to perform with other people and take that energy forward. Like that's just the transference of it. That's really,
Mhm.
really cool. So, when let's go to the beginning. So, when did you start playing?
You
How
mean
did the
like when I was a baby?
yeah, like like what's the journey? Like, why what drew you to the bass? Yeah.
The journey. I don't know how many musicians of my generation you've spoken with, but we all have one thing in common: the Beatles,
Hmm.
1964, Ed Sullivan Show,
Yeah.
and everybody has a different reason. You know, my reason was I was a fat little kid. I was 13 years old. I was invisible to girls, living in New Jersey, West New York, New Jersey, and I saw the reaction of the girls on Ed Sullivan to the
Hmm.
Beatles performance, and I said, I want that.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. I found my purpose in life. You know? And it was purely out of wanting to be noticed, you know. And I thought music is going to be my vehicle for that. You know, little did I know about the journey of becoming a musician, which is it's an endless journey.
Right.
It's you know, people ask me, do I practice? Do I do this? It's like,
Yeah.
do you breathe? It's the same thing. It's like I I wouldn't even think about it. I just do it. You know, I just go ahead and I wake up every morning, make the coffee, sit in front of my TV, bypass the news, go straight to YouTube, and I got some certain YouTube channels that I go to, and I get it's like a rabbit hole.
Uh-huh.
One thing leads to the other, you know, and I start working on this, working on that. Mostly theory, music theory, you know.
That was one of my next questions. Okay. So
Yeah.
theory, how important do you think theory is to the whole
Oh,
of a musician?
it's from going to from goo goo gaga gaga, you know, baby talk
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
having an adult conversation with somebody, you know.
I like that.
Yeah, you can spend your whole life going goo goo gaga and or pointing at things, you know, like a caveman.
Yeah.
But if you really want to be eloquent in your music, you know, not only do you need an education, one thing is to have an education, but you need to work with teachers that 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 give you the tools. One thing is getting the tools. One thing is knowing how to apply the tools.
Sure.
You know, this is how you hold a hammer, and this is how you do it. And instead of like, hey, here's a hammer. Good luck.
Figure it out.
Figure it out. Yeah. You know, so you know, it's a must. It's a must. And the more I listen to new music, the more I realize that there's more of a need for education. You know,
Yes.
and not just not just knowledge, but academia, a certain sequence of learning things. One door opens to another door of learning. You know, I find myself at my age, I've been doing it for so long that it's really hard for me to commit myself to like, okay, here's triads. Okay, which is great. I mean, I'm working on my triads and doing arpeggios and all of that, and voice leading, all of that. Okay, but there's a certain point that I go, you know what? I'm doing this already. Okay, so I know what I'm doing. So I just bypass and I go fast forward into something else. But then again, I've been doing this for 50 years. You know, for somebody that's young, I really believe that a proper academia, a sequence of information being revealed on how to do it, it's the perfect steps. And but the problems that we have nowadays, like you were talking about, kids want to bypass that. And when I
Yes.
say kids, it's anybody who is still living at home. If you're not a professional musician living outside of, you know, outside of your parents' house, you're a kid. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
You know, so yeah, because we all want to go out there and do it. And, you know, music is so emotional, and we just want to. We got something to say. We got something to express ourselves, and it's like the quicker we do it, the better. You know,
Hmm.
but there needs to be steps, and I don't mean baby steps, but just steps.
Yeah. No, a sequence. That's a really brilliant way to say it because it's, the information is here and you got to go but to get there. You can't leapfrog it. You got to go in
Yeah,
order. So
yeah,
well said.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, all right, let's go into gear because a lot of the students are like super, gear nerds. So what would you say is your favorite piece of musical equipment that, your go-to?
Oh, I got so many. I mean,
I
it's
know.
like to me, gears it's a toolbox. You show up to the construction site with more than just one hammer and one screwdriver. You know,
Right.
show us with a toolbox or a truck full of tools. You know,
Right.
and whatever the job uh, calls for. I do a lot of projects. You know, people that I've never met, and if the music is really good, I'll play on their tracks.
Cool.
And I I audition my basses. I have a room. I mean, these are just my to go bunch of
Nice.
instruments that I got here, and you know, and they're all different. They all sound very different. They have
Hmm.
different tones to them, and but they're close to me. So I grab them and I go, okay, yes, no, and I record them and I A B and B. So you know that process takes a little bit longer for me because I'm not a cookie cutter type of musician that I just lay down tracks and I use the same everything for every
Hmm.
track that I do. No, because I that's not my approach. It's never been my approach in the studio. I especially in the latter days when I was working, I was in a band, the band Dio with Ronnie James Dio,
Yeah.
and he was the most uh, character. His voice, he became a personality in the songs. He wrote all his lyrics, and he was a English major in college, so his lyrics are very personal but heroic at the same
Oh
time.
yeah.
You know, and my role as the bass player in the band was really defined by his quests, musical quests. It seemed like every time he started a song, he was either a wizard or the
Yeah.
man on the silver mountain.
It's the stuff that makes you go like, yeah, that's
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah,
thing.
it was
Yeah.
like, and I wasn't alone. I mean, it was like the whole audience was held captive by
Right.
his performance. You know, so yes, I mean on stage because you're on tour and you're limited to how much you're going to bring with you. So you basically probably heard me play with one or two basses with Dio, but recording wise, different. I will have a totally different approach. You know that certain character in the song, I would have to like cast one of my basses. You know, and
Hmm.
according to the timbre that was needed Also, I would listen to the guitars. I would listen to the drums. See how that my bass fits in the frequencies. Uh, Usually send unless a DI, a direct clean bass source is requested, I would send to the engineer what I felt was the tone that was suitable for for that song, the bass tone, completely
Right.
done. Because if you leave it up to the engineer, they'll
Oh
get
no.
bombarded with information and they're just going to leave it as it is. And your bass track will be like this big, surrounded by saturated guitars and
Hmm.
drums and you're like this. So what I tell you to do is this is where my bass should be, and I'm going to send them a track that is that big, that fits with
Smart.
everything else. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, relying on the sound guy, the front of house guy, it can be a nightmare. I just did a gig in Vermont for New Year's Eve, and we had to play all. It was a corporate ski resort thing, and we had to play a lot of different genres of music. And on stage, it sounded amazing, but when I listened to people on the break talking, they're like, "I don't hear your guitar." I'm like, "What? I
Yeah.
just played an hour and a half. Why didn't anyone tell me you couldn't hear me?"
Yeah. Yeah. It happens. It really
It
does.
sure does.
I'm in a band, the Guess Who, and we have a really great front of the house engineer, and yeah, he mixes us just like a record, you know.
That's what you want.
Yeah, and my favorite basses, I have a signature model Spectre,
Spectre, right? Yeah.
which is an incredible instrument. I have a signature model acoustic bass guitar with a company called Sawtooth, which I'm really, really proud of that. So, those are two of my favorite instruments. But then again, I have like, collectible stuff,
Oh
vintage
yeah.
instruments. And sometimes, you think, okay, this vintage instrument is going to sound really good with this track, and you plug it in and you go, yeah, it just gets lost. It doesn't have the personality. This one thing about vintage. Like I have the 66 Precision that I love, but I usually bring it in if I'm going to a studio with an engineer. So because they know how to make it sound,
Right.
the way it should. I am very limited in my knowledge and in outboard gear that I have at home. I so the best that I can hope for is when I record and I send something over that there's going to be an engineer that can sweeten it up. Even though I've mentioned to you that I send it pretty much ready, but there's a difference of this and then making it like
Right.
that. Applying like certain compressors and
Hmm.
certain just sweetening up the EQ a little bit.
Sure.
Basically, put it to the same bus or the same board. See, I don't have a board at home. Everything is through it with a module. A converter.
Hmm.
Once the records that I work on and I just send my track to engineers, they have a board. So
Right.
everything else is going through the same board. And boards have a characteristic, tonal
Yes.
characteristic to them. So everything else is copacetic with that
Right.
tone. Yeah,
Right. You run everything through a Neve, it's going to sound amazing.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because everything is going through an Eve. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see what else we got in my list of questions here.
Good questions.
Um, what was your, okay, this is kind of ties into the gear stuff, but have you ever, the answer is probably yes, but follow my train of thought. So things go wrong. And again, we're a school, so our students are dealing with not only the anxiety of performing in front of people now, but, oh my gosh, what if I break a string? What if one of my pedals breaks? At the scale that you're doing gigs, how do you cope when something goes wrong with your gear?
I use the strings.
Me too.
Used those for about 10 years. Never broken a string. I think the days of breaking strings for bass, unless you're doing like a Billy Sheehan that you're just pulling really high. And those are pretty much gone. So I go on stage with a total confidence that my Diodario strings, they're gonna sound great. They're not gonna break. They're not gonna they're not even gonna go out of tune.
Right.
I use I use different tuners. I use either a Snark
Hmm.
or a TC Electronics, those little clip-ons.
Hmm.
I do my own tuning between songs. I'm one of those compulsive tuners, you know. Even though it doesn't go out of tune, but still,
Peace of mind.
yeah, that's what I do. I'm like, you know, compulsively tuning my bass. I don't know. As pedals, I use dark glass pedals and some Boss pedals. Uh, different companies. Tech 21, Solo
Nice.
Dallas. Yeah, I'm just looking around at this stuff.
Right.
You know, I you know the pedals travel with me in a bag because I use them on stage and then I bring them home from after you know we usually tour on the weekend, so rarely do we
Hmm.
do like a 10-day stretch, you know.
Right.
And so they come home with me, and I use them when I record at home or in the studio, somebody else's studio that I might happen to go to, and then I go back on the road again, and they come with me in a backpack. So
Cool.
they really don't break. I mean, see, with me, the pedals is I leave them on all the time. I'll have like, let's say, a vintage Ultra from Dark Glass and the Hyper Luminal, which is the compressor, and I get a tone. I use in ears, the Ultimate Pro in ears, and it sounds perfect.
Right.
You know, I only use one ear, one side, and then the other one is just for ambience because
Right.
we play with some volume on stage, so
Hmm.
it's all balanced. And I
Yeah.
mic an Ampeg SVT, which is my amplifier of choice for
Great choice.
decades. Yeah, and a mic put I believe that we're using Sennheisers. You know, we carry our own mics
Hmm.
and put that on one speaker, and it's exactly the same tone that I'm getting on stage is what comes through my in ear, and it's wonderful.
That's very cool. It's interesting you leave one out because I was about a month and a half ago. I was talking to this guy Jake Bowen. He plays in a band Periphery, three guitar band, very technical, sweep picking, heavy 8 string, 7 string guitars, and they're using the Axe FX 3
Mm.
for their everything, and it's all in ears, no stage volume, no nothing. And
Mm.
to me, that's super disorienting. I want to feel the music a little bit, so I like that you have one and not both.
Yeah,
Because
yeah. I've watched performances of bands on stage that do not have a backline, and it's weird because if you stand in front of the band, you don't hear anything. It's
right,
all, you know, it's either coming out of like these little monitors on like little wedges pointing at
yeah,
the audience. It's like this. Come on,
yeah,
come on. I mean, and then again, I'm old school. I mean, I used to go with Ozzy on stage, 4 SVT cabinets, and at
nice,
least, and everything that was on stage was plugged in.
awesome. But then you
Uh,
feel the air moving, like
yeah, well, you
that's a
feel it
thing.
moving. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then the side fills were like massive side fills, you know, and then
Hmm.
you have wedges in front of you and all of that going on. I I, I guess for the performer to be able to just to hear themselves through the in ears and there's nothing else going on stage, okay, that's fine. But I'm more concerned with the audience.
Right,
They're not going to hear it
right,
unless they happen to be standing right next to the front of house
right,
sound guy, you know, because that's a sweet spot. The rest
right.
of
Oh,
the place,
totally.
yeah, it's not going to be feeling the energy, and it's not going to air. It's not going to be moving.
Hmm.
It should be air moving. That's another thing that I hate is those fishbowl drummers. Not the drummers, but to see a drummer being put in a situation where they're inside of a fishbowl, you know, those
It's the worst.
plexiglass
Hmm.
cages.
Hmm.
What's that?
Yeah.
What are you doing? You
Yep.
know, But first of all, you got in-ears, and I get it. Yeah. The cymbals going to leak through the singer's microphone and your in-ear and all of that.
Eh,
It's like, how long have you been doing this?
right,
I mean, it's like, how did you put up with this before? You know,
right.
this is not going to make you a better singer, and it's not going to save your hearing, because if you're cranking those headphones, there
Oh,
goes
it's
your
gonna
hearing.
shoot exactly. Yeah.
You know?
I'd say I just saw a question on here, and then I'm gonna probably wrap it up just because they're gonna shut us down right after an hour, and I'm notorious for talking, and then it just abruptly stops.
Oh
But
boy.
someone asked a question, and I think it's a brilliant question. I haven't heard it. What do you eat before your performances? Because you're an energetic, very you're a rock star. You are fun to watch play. What's your diet like? Like,
Yeah, when I'm on the road, my lunch is my main meal. I'll eat before 1:30, 2 o'clock.
wow.
Yeah, and that's for an 8 o'clock performance. So I give it 6 hours. I might have a protein bar right after sound check, and that's it.
Wow.
And then when I'm home, my main meal is dinner, and breakfast will be a smoothie, some yogurt, things like that. Yeah, I keep it
Interesting.
light. I really don't need that much food. Yeah, to sustain myself. I don't.
Right.
I don't know if this is something that is a thing already in your area, but in California, CBD.
Yes.
Yeah, I take CBD products. Yeah, no
Do you,
no THC, just a
right.
CBD. Yeah.
Do you find it helps?
Oh, 1,000%.
How do you do it? Do you do the tincture or the cream, or what's your?
Well, this one is a company called Life Pack Organics, and it's a powder. Um, there's
Oh,
there's different products, and the best way to take them. Okay, there is a powder that you put in a hot beverage, like in your
oh,
coffee in the morning, and you stir it, and you drink it, and that's it. And it clears me completely. It gets rid of my fog.
that's awesome.
When I'm on the road, I take the capsules. They have like little capsules. It's
Hmm.
because it's easier to travel with. You don't have to deal with
Sure.
the powder on the road.
Right.
And yeah, but they have different products. They have roll on for like sore muscles, and especially when you're playing and
Yeah, I've
you're
seen the
spending a
cream
lot of
for
time.
arthritis. It
Yeah,
works.
they're amazing, amazing. I'm talking about life changing, amazing stuff.
That's amazing.
Yeah, Life Pack Organics, and they have a web page and stuff. Yeah,
Cool. Well, check that out, man. That's see, you learn new stuff all the time.
yeah.
That's very cool.
Mhm.
Well, they're going to shut us down at 5,
Oh
so
no,
yeah, I know.
we're too loud.
Let me see. All right, yeah, we got to
Mr.
go
Van
home.
Blaine's gonna come. Okay, guys.
Pull the plug. Um, yeah, I feel like I got all the questions. Your stories were so cool. Thank you so much for being part of this. And I actually ordered your book off Amazon this morning, so
Oh,
I'm excited to read
thanks.
that. Oh yeah,
Can I give a shout out to some friends in Holland,
100%.
Saskia and Mickey. Mickey is actually Adrian Vandenberg's daughter and a dear friend. I just wanted to add that.
Awesome, dude. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, that we had. I mean, I see people from Istanbul and St. Louis and Argentina and Brazil, so we're global right now. So
You mean
so that
we could have done this in Spanish?
yeah, apparently because there's a
Hola,
lot
amigo,
of.
¿cómo están?
Yeah, I'm looking through these. Awesome, dude. Well, thank you so much. This
Thank
is
you,
like
Rob. Thank
I've been
you.
on Cloud9 all day. Thank you,
Thank you to
and
everybody that tuned in. Thanks a lot.
stay